Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. As Ukraine and Russia prepare for a new round of peace talks in Geneva on February 17th and 18th, key territorial questions remain unresolved. The Kremlin says the negotiations will address the, quote, main issues, while also signaling a broader agenda beyond ceasefire proposals. Joining me to discuss the latest is Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Post. Bohdan, so happy to have you on World Talks again. Let me go straight into it. The Kremlin says, as I just mentioned, that Geneva talks are going to address reportedly the main issues, including territory. What does that realistically and actually mean?
Well, it amounts to give us eastern Ukraine, not just the Donbass, but several other provinces, regions, Zaporizhia, Kherson, etc. It's the usual, there's nothing new there. It's their standard line from a long time ago. We want, let's say, a third of Ukraine. Just give us a third of Ukraine, we'll agree to a ceasefire, and then we can guess what they'll do when they've regrouped. So for Ukrainians, it's not just Donbass anymore, which is complicated because despite 4 years of war, the Russians have not managed to seize all of the Donbass. And on the western side of the Donbass, Ukraine has very strong lines of fortification, which have not allowed the Russians to move forward. They've moved forward in the south, in the center, a little bit gradually. But the Russians are claiming all of Donbass, which means give us up your defensive lines, not just the territory, and then, we'll be nice with you for a while.
Let me ask you this time around, again, it might be quite a difficult question because it seems as though for the past few months, I won't say years, Bohdan, do you really personally expect any concrete results or breakthroughs this time around?
No, I don't. And I don't think any Ukrainians do, because we have seen no signs from Moscow that they are willing to compromise. The rhetoric indeed has become more intense and I was going to say vitriolic, because there's a lot of hatred there that's expressed in the television stations, etc., about the Ukrainians. I mean, they're not even talking about Nazis. They're talking about exterminating, getting rid of the Ukrainians as a factor, not only as a political factor, but as a cultural factor. So, a lot of people in the West don't see that because they only see what the headlines in Western newspapers. But if you follow the Russian press, the hatred has been stepped up even more, and it is very genocidal in its tone. And Putin himself, in the last month or two, has been speaking not about a special operation to save Russian speakers in the East or get rid of the so-called Nazi regime in Kyiv, which they see. But now it's about the return of historical lands, like, the empire. What's next? Poland in the 19th century? That was part of the Russian Empire, despite all your revolutions and protests, etc. So, many people don't understand that in Europe and the outside world, that it's not simply about a bit of land, a slither of land in the Donbass or in the south, Mariupol or whatever. It's an empire trying to reestablish itself. And it's a threat to Europe, it's a threat to Poland, it's a threat to the Baltic states, etc. Maybe not to Donald Trump, who wants to make deals with these guys.
Well, I mean, I could also say I do remember once, say Putin saying that the worst thing that could have happened was the dissolution of the Soviet Union. You are speaking about Russia, Bohdan. Let me ask you this: can you tell me a little bit about the Russian delegation that's going to be leading these talks in Geneva? And it's one thing about the delegation, but what does the composition of the Russian delegation, of the team, is going to actually tell us about why specifically which person was chosen and what it's going to tell us about Moscow's intentions?
Well, you see, a few weeks ago when we had the a meeting in one of the Arabian countries, it seemed that the Russians were trying to talk more about practical issues, where the ceasefire line would be, etc. So you had military and intelligence officers in it. But now we're back to square one. We have a Medinsky leading it, who is a kind of a watered down version of Dugin, the kind of ideological guru of for Putin. Medinsky, is a historian, cultural specialist who, Russia über alles type. This is all ours. We have a right to dominate as Slavs over other Slavs. It's. But on the other hand, look, you can compare it to what Trump is doing. Trump is not putting Rubio or Kellogg as before in the delegation. He's putting businessmen and relatives, Witkoff and I've forgotten his name, the relative of Trump himself. It's
Are you
deal
talking about
making.
Kushner?
Kushner,
Kushner.
exactly. Now the point is, what can Medinsky, who does he speak for? He doesn't speak for the foreign ministry. He doesn't speak for the former KGB, for the GRU or whatever. Uh, so what is his role there? Just to go through appearances that they are talking about a peace making process. The problem is, or not the problem, the key issue is that Russia has not budged on anything. If anything, if you can fault Zelensky as a pragmatist, he's bending over backwards to assure the West and to assure Trump that Ukraine is ready to negotiate. But Russia is, on the other hand, has, as I've said before, it's intensified its all or nothing position. Give us everything we want and more, otherwise, no deal. We'll keep bombing, we'll keep trying to destroy as much of Ukraine and destroy its morale of the population as we can. And what's Europe here? We don't care about Europe. We have a partner in Trump. He understands us. He's a deal maker, etc. And with Witkoff, perhaps we can reach some financial deal. And if Ukraine is put on its knees, then America will gain, Russia will gain. Europe can stay in the sidelines.
But will we at least be able to expect another prisoner exchange?
Look, that is a very positive aspect, but it's probably the only, shall we say, positive, concrete result from these talks. That in itself is worthwhile. There are thousands of Ukrainians still. I mean, let's not underestimate. There are still thousands of Ukrainian political prisoners. There's several thousand Russian political prisoners. Political. I'm talking about my old age when I used to work in Amnesty International. Prisoners of war. And of course, they need to be exchanged. Their families are waiting. They've suffered enough. So, from the humanitarian point of view, this is important. But this is not what a peacemaking process is about. It's about give and take. And what is Russia prepared to give? At the moment, nothing, not even a ceasefire, you know? And the dangerous thing is that we have the fourth anniversary of the all out war, because remember, Russia in 2014 had already seized with its green men Crimea and with shipped in Russians from Rostov and Belgorod, parts of the Donbass. But the all out war began on the 24th of February 2022. We're fast approaching that. What are we expecting? There's talk of peace talk, and we'll go through the motions again in Geneva in the next day or two. But in reality, what will we see? Heavy bombing again by the Russians on the cities, Kyiv, Odessa, Zaporizhia, Sumy, Kharkiv, etc., and no semblance of wanting to actually have a decent sit down and say, look, enough is enough. What can we actually realistically agree on temporarily, de facto, not de jure, in terms of borders, new borders, but where will the ceasefire line be? Who will monitor it? What assurances can we give Ukraine that this is not going to happen, repeat itself in the next year or two or three when Russia has regrouped and, sort of regrouped not only its men and but its weaponry that has been largely destroyed. So, 4 years into it, we're we're not even closer to an agreement because now, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, Putin is talking not about a special operation to liberate, to emancipate the eastern part of Ukraine, so-called Russian-speaking part. Now he's talking about the return of historical lands. And what I think is important for the audience to know is that if you were following Russian television these days, it's vitriolic. There's hatred. It's very, what shall I say? It's the languages of genocide. The Ukrainians need to be destroyed, not just as a state,
Bohdan,
but they are in the way.
Bohdan, we do have a little under 2 minutes left, and I do want to ask you this moving forward. I mean, unfortunately, if there's one thing that has put Ukraine in a negative light recently was, of course, the recent arrest of Herman Halushchenko, right? Do you think that this recent corruption case is actually going to affect Ukraine's credibility moving forward of having any leverage at the negotiating table?
In a nutshell, look, we have a war on the front, on the battlefront. We have an internal war in cleaning up. I think Zelensky's been forced to remove Yermak and those around him. The latest arrest shows that Ukraine is serious about this, that it's not doing it in a half-hearted way, because obviously this does not reflect well on Ukraine and its government. But the fact that they are actually arresting these people and going through what's needed, what the West demands, and what morality demands, I think is a good sign. So I would say if you balance the two, I think this is positive and it shouldn't be seen as negative. I mean, retrospectively, of course, the damage has been done.
Thank you so much, Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Post, for being with us here on World Talks today. And that's all for this episode here of World Talks on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.